Hey there everyone! A lot to cover today, especially considering the events of last episode. Ino unveiled to the rest of her peers, but chiefly to Naruto, that she is herself a Jinchuriki. This has been a background mystery since the start of my rewrite, and I've sprinkled clues in throughout. I also shoved in a lot of red herrings just to have fun with all of you too. As a result of this unveiling, we're looking at some additional and much needed context. Other recent mysteries include why Orochimaru brought Naruto to his lab. Was he just trying to sow chaos or unrest in young Naruto, or did he actually have intent behind that? Not just Ino, but all of the remaining Konoha 12 bound together to retrieve Naruto. As a lot of people pointed out, Naruto had Talk no Jutsu performed on him. Perhaps the first time I've utilized Talk no Jutsu, and it was on the inventor of the technique. There were a few people complaining about the chaos of too many characters. However, I really wanted to accentuate just how much all of his peers will stand behind him. Some, like Neji, do so out of duty. Others, like Tenten, do so out of camaraderie. Still others, like Sasuke, have an already existing bond with him, regardless of how strong or weak that bond is. Now we have some distinct links between Naruto and all of his former classmates. We also learned about these various Jonin level teams being sent out to seek all of the captured Leaf Shinobi. One last reminder that this coming Monday will have no episode due to Easter holidays. I'll be seeing you on next Friday. Enough with this filler though, am I right? Let's get into the episode. The war effort has been mostly without incident, even 3 weeks into its invasion. Orochimaru expected resistance into the Land of Grass, but there were no enemies hidden there. Upon reaching the Land of Rock's border, he expected to find the brunt of forces, but there were so few that it made him suspicious. Stretching the forces across a 300-mile spread, Orochimaru wanted to rake over every village, farm, and trail he could find. The intent was to rout the rock shinobi out from wherever it was they were hiding, but there didn't seem to be any hiding anywhere. A pathetic force waited at the border, lambs to the slaughter. Along the coast to the north, he was hearing reports of greater resistance, but still overall lacking. To the west, they were encumbered with a unique challenge. Do they pass through the Dreadlands for a doubtless advantage, or take the long way around to keep morale high? The brunt of the forces were passing on a northwest trajectory along the mainland. One more week, and they'd be upon the capital. Where could Onoki be hiding his forces? Early on, Orochimaru suspected that they were attempting to get around the forces and attack the relatively unguarded Konoha. However, the sensors in the rear of the pack had detected nothing so far. Sitting in some bushes beside the only exit from the port town along the Land of Rock's coast, Ino sits huddled with Shikamaru. Uncharacteristically, it had been raining for 3 days straight. Nothing was dry anymore, and it was impossible to start a fire. They could raise tents, but that would immediately give away their location. And if they tried to find natural cover, they'd be leaving their post. They were designated to intercept any stragglers or escapees from fleeing the town for help, while the brunt of the forces took control of the town. However, like the previous 2 villages, there wasn't much of a struggle. Kurenai was very confused about where their enemy was hiding. While Ino and Shikamaru hid under a tree to evade the rain as much as possible, Sasuke hid with Kurenai to watch for the escapees. Sasuke didn't really talk much with Ino during their academy days. She used to give him awkward looks and act weird around him. It led to a fairly uninteresting relationship between the two, but since her confession, he'd been completely caught up for words. He had absolutely no idea how to react in the moment. Perhaps it was easier for Naruto because their paths often crossed when they were younger, and he shouldn't treat her any differently, but he nevertheless had this newfound shyness about talking to her. But then again, he had a newfound shyness for talking to anyone. He wouldn't call it shyness though. More and more, Sasuke found himself deep in thought about how Shisui faked his death and where in the world he could be hiding all this time. What did he hope to accomplish by attacking Konoha like that? Because other than a few people captured, he really didn't do anything. Just thinking about it infuriated Sasuke. Every time Shisui's name repeated in his head, or the vision of his face, Sasuke would forget himself and snarl silently. He was clearly too far beneath Shisui at this point in skill, but he had no idea how to close the gap. Shikamaru, in the moment of her confession, was perturbed, but he couldn't entirely blame Ino for her decision. When he, Choji, and Ino were still very little, he and Choji were charged with protecting her from the monster within. It was a joint responsibility, a secret between the three of them. This wasn't a burden that was ever meant solely for Ino's shoulders. Choji's family were naturally very strong and had a lot of stamina. At the first moment that Ino would start to spiral out of control, Choji could use that strength to keep her still. Meanwhile, Shikamaru's clan had the natural affinity for shadow style. It just so happened that the seal used for Ino was a shadow-type seal. Just as the beast can slowly finagle its way to freedom, Shikamaru could keep the seal tightly locked. It was lucky that Shikamaru, even in his youth, was smart enough to understand how his shadow tendrils could keep the seal shut. I mean, there was a lot of undue stress put on the Ino Shigecho team when Minato chose to separate them. The Hokage told him that Ino needed to learn some self-control. There would be dire consequences one day if she could never handle being alone, since friends fall on the battlefield all the time. The last thing Minato needed was for her sheltered, delicate mind to never be pushed to survive alone. The three-tailed beast does not have the same level of violent rage that the nine-tails does, so Ino needed to use alone time to build confidence in herself, in suppressing the beast all on her own. Even Shikamaru had a lapse of judgment and almost spilled the beans to Naruto during the intermission to Phase 3 of the Chunin exams. He was placed in a team away from Ino so that she could learn to discipline herself, but his rightful place was beside her as a warden for the beast. Though they were split up for relatively short periods of time, given the attack on the Chunin exams and Choji's capture, Minato gave in to their demands at last. Not to mention the moral support both needed from each other as they dealt with the idea of maybe never seeing Choji again. Given how elusive the Akatsuki were, it was unrealistic to expect to find and rescue everyone who was taken. It was more important now than ever before that Shikamaru stayed by Ino's side, just in case. Kurenai was updated on her status the moment Ino entered the team. It was a lot to take in, since she didn't have experience teaching a Jinchuriki before, not to mention the idea that the village had a second secret Jinchuriki. That's a lot of news for anybody. However, unlike Might Guy, Kurenai had a little bit of skill with shadow style. While she wouldn't be a great benefit to helping Ino keep the beast caged, she stood a better chance than Might Guy. Indeed, Kurenai credited her promotion to Jonin to the shadow style that she'd recently unveiled. She'd learned her whole life that aside from the Nara clan and Jinchuriki, shadow style was mostly a Kage-level technique. So when she uncovered it by accident while practicing some high-level genjutsu as a Chunin, Lord Hokage turned a lot of his attention to her. Never did she think it would prove so useful as to help keep a tailed beast chained. Given that Shikamaru and Ino were an inseparable pair at this point, Kurenai wondered why Sasuke had been assigned to her. He hadn't really spoken much to anyone since they set out on their war mission. She knew it was likely due to finding out who slaughtered his clan. It was a difficult topic to broach, so she continued to bide her time for the best chance to speak to him. Ino shivered against the cold rain. They had gathered sticks together to create a small lean-to, but it only guarded against the wind, and they were already chilled. With every shiver Ino gave, she could feel the beast within shivering, as if it too were cold. Through a unique interaction with her mind transfer jutsu, Ino found it really easy to speak to the Sanbi, though it rarely had anything to say to her. She definitely felt a lot of resentment from it, but unlike the pure rage she felt from the fox during Phase 2.5, she didn't really feel that kind of hatred coming from the Sanbi. Might Guy had her constantly practice her mind transfer jutsu, but there was a great risk involved with its use. Since very early on, Ino had learned that if she left her own body to possess another, the Sanbi could take control of her body. It seemed to have a nervous energy and rarely took advantage, but in the few moments that it had in her life, it could have easily killed people had she not been surrounded by the Nara and Akimichi clans. Her seal was different from Naruto's, just as it was different from Gaara's. As her father explained it to her, All the Jinchuriki in the world have different seals for their beasts. Each seal has a particularly unique method of unlocking it. Unique, such that no one person could go around and utilize their collective power. Each seal's unlock method was known to very few people, so that in the worst case scenario, the beast could easily be killed. Because Naruto thought he was virtually alone in the world, Ino wondered how much about the specifics he was ever taught. She looks up from her huddle with Shikamaru and peers at Sasuke. He'd known Naruto much better than anyone else from a young age. She had such a big crush on Sasuke in Academy that she didn't really learn how to talk to him. Given the stresses of the last few months, she didn't think she still had the crush, but her throat certainly closed up whenever she tried to say anything to him. Unlike along the rainy coast, Shino was hard-pressed to keep his jacket on as the clear skies above let the burning sun beat down on him. At the very least, his sunglasses were finally doing their job. He followed the rest of Team Guy up a steep, overgrown path along with several dozen other Leaf Shinobi. Rock Lee was at the very front in a weird competition with Might Guy to see who could reach the top first. The two were so far the opposite of Shino's personality that he wondered why he had to depart from Kurenai's team. Neji was rather quiet too, but even Shino found his personality abrasive. As the team reaches the top of the hill, Might Guy kneels and welcomes them all to the Dreadlands. At least visually, Shino has no idea why this area would be given such a foreboding name. It looked just like a forested area with a few foothills in the distance. The Land of Fire did not have an area like the Dreadlands, so it was never a subject that was brought up for young Genin. Since the ever-persistent war deterred nearly any missions that crossed country borders, it made sense that they had never learned about it. Seeing the curiosity on their collective faces, Might Guy decides to elucidate exactly why they're called the Dreadlands. The Dreadlands are a forbidden zone in the Land of Rock. There are benefits to coming here, but untold dangers as well. Some of the benefits included the fact that the atmosphere was thick with chakra. Breathing in the air here will supply them all with an endless supply of chakra. They will never tire, nor will they ever get hungry. They can run as hard as they can for 7 days and nights, and never feel the associated fatigue. Forbidden zones like this were not designated by humans, but rather by the beasts that roam these kinds of lands. Several generations ago, Hashirama Senju intended to capture the tailed beasts and divvy them up among the nations to balance power. However, this plan never saw fruition when he died fighting against Madara Uchiha. Nevertheless, following his death, the nations united to attempt his plan anyway. The Leaf successfully tackled the nine-tailed fox, just as the Wind managed to get their own one tail. However, not all the nations were successful. Mankind, collectively, were only able to take control of 5 of the 9 beasts. After the other 4 beasts wizened to the crimes humans were committing against them, they became ultra-violent against any who came near. As such, Jinchuriki like Naruto were not allowed anywhere near these zones, just in case his tailed beast had an odd reaction to the free-range beast here. Neji asks which tailed beast is in this zone, and Might Guy tells him it's Gobi, the 5-tailed beast. Rumors often reported that there were still rock shinobi who kept trying to seal the beast, which only enraged it further. So it's dangerous to even enter the area, because if they're spotted, the beast won't hesitate to annihilate them all. However, if they do get through undetected, they can set up an extremely strong flanking advantage against a mountain village that's known for its defenses. If they can take that town, they'll have a really strong checkpoint before assaulting the capital. Waiting for a few Jonin teams to take the lead, Might Guy leads his own team into the Dreadlands. Rock Lee asks Might Guy if the benefits of this area will even affect him. Might Guy tells him that just because he can't mold chakra like everyone else can, doesn't mean his body doesn't use chakra. He wouldn't be able to access the gates if his body had no ability to process chakra. Sakura reaches down to pick up a flying Raijin kunai, bracing herself before throwing it as far as she can straight ahead. Sprinting past her, Tenten runs to the kunai's spot, and like Sakura before her, throws it again. This time, it's Sakura's turn to sprint from her spot to the kunai. Traveling with the main group through the mainland meant that Team Asuma definitely wasn't seeing any action. With Orochimaru leading the cause an hour's run ahead of them, there was little else to do but train. Orochimaru wanted the army spread out such that the leading forces could be augmented in a fight and retreat before being taken out. Asuma made sure, of course, to not overdo it and tire them out, just in case an emergency would distract them. Repeatedly, though, he does tell the girls not to hold back, and to throw that kunai as far as they possibly can. It'll keep their throwing arms primed, and they'll be getting free cardio in as well. Naruto complains beside him, moaning and groaning about his own assignment. Now the group's only censor, Asuma has Naruto keep his proverbial radar on full power and continually asks for updates. Whenever the girls get too far ahead and beyond Naruto's sensory range, he's to tell Asuma. After they exit his range, he's to teleport to the kunai and let them rest so Asuma can catch up. And of course, Naruto's meant to run back to him instead of waiting. In this way, he hopes to probe their weaknesses or at least build their teamwork. All the girls of Konoha seem to get along pretty well with Naruto, but it's how he treats them that concerns Asuma. Following Naruto's disappearance from the mission room, he returned with a different demeanor that really warmed to Tenten. Nonetheless, with Naruto strained and tired, Asuma wanted to see how his run-out patients would respond to the girls poking fun at him. Even that was much less than Asuma expected. Sakura had quite a fiery personality. Asuma expected Naruto to be the victim of Sakura's friendly fire, but it just didn't seem to be happening. Unlike the Coastal Invasion Party and the Dreadlands people, they hadn't seen an ounce of combat yet, and have traveled for weeks in boredom, aside from Asuma's training. Orochimaru's forces have seen combat, as there's evidence in his wake of such. They come across fallen shinobi occasionally that the forest shinobi use to stock up in ninja tools. It's a rough business, but any further advantage they can build, they've been instructed to take. Asuma tells his Chunin that the Land of Rock won't take these defeats lying down. He suggests that maybe they're waiting for the Leaf Shinobi to grow tired of their march and then mount a counterattack. After all, there hasn't been any real defenses out of any of the villages or forts yet. As far as the fighting force goes, the Leaf has the advantage of numbers and skill. Therefore, the Rock needs to use clever plans to balance the playing field. Since the revelation about Ino, Sakura's been split. Ino was her closest friend in Academy. To suddenly learn that she was a Jinchuriki all this time left her very confused. On one hand, she understood completely why it had to be kept under wraps, to help keep not just Ino safe, but the village too. On the other, though, if Ino couldn't trust her best friend with the information, then who is Sakura to Ino after all? And how lonely is Ino for keeping this in for her whole life? Tenten found some vindication in learning about Ino's secret. It helped to reaffirm that you don't have to be the Hokage's kid to have something so special given to you. She obviously understands that it wasn't Ino's choice to become the host, but to know that someone other than Naruto has a chance at great power was reassuring. Ino was the member of a great clan, so she already had that innate advantage. Nevertheless, it helped Tenten in her own confidence. She constantly just suppressed her fears of accomplishing very little, because lacking powerful lineage meant a lot in the world of ninja. And now she was teamed with Sakura, who came from just as nameless a family as her own. And Sakura didn't seem the least bit dissuaded by her situation. Naruto was the most confused of all the genin at learning the news. Maybe Ino thought that it would encourage Naruto to stay, but if anything, he wanted more than ever to leave. The idea that he led this cursed life while she went this whole time without facing any of the ridicule left him jealous, like horribly, horribly jealous, in addition to his pre-existing loneliness and rejection. Now he felt like he had even more reason to want to leave. But Ino had more for him to hear, as Sasuke wrestled to keep him still. Like him, she was born into this, just like him. Rin Nohara, the previous host, had just died, and Minato didn't have the power to suppress the beast for long. With his flying Raijin, he was able to teleport it near to the village, and it just so happened that Ino was born that same night. It was a last-minute decision, and one her father agreed to out of a loyalty to the village. Non-human containers cannot hold tailed beasts for long, so Minato was forced to curse a second child of the village. But Inoichi, her own father, didn't want her to have to fear outside danger, so they kept it as a close-knit secret for years. Shikamaru figured it out on his own when he was just 5 years old, due to the nature of their training. Choji would learn 1 year later. In that moment, Ino asked for the kids present to promise, to swear, not to reveal this secret to anyone else. Even Naruto, he couldn't tell Minato that he now knew. The less people who knew anything about this moment, the better. Everyone agreed to it rather quickly in their own personal reassurance to her. Naruto stayed quiet as he considered her words. Rather than his mind being changed, it was just challenged now. If they're all keeping it a secret, then her confession to him was pointless. They can't even talk about having a similar upbringing, because they didn't. The only thing that tied their similarity together was the beast that she's asked Naruto not to talk about. So what? Naruto asked, a bit to Ino but also to the whole group. What does any of this mean? You all admit that you care about me out of nowhere, but the moment we return to the village, everything returns to ignoring my problems? They're not your problems, Sakura admitted. The idea that everyone's so okay with being mean to the Hokage's son just tells us how big a problem it is for everyone. Next time I see this, I'll step up. That's a promise, Naruto, Sakura tells him confidently. Neji averted his gaze and the others remained mostly silent instead of joining in on the promise. When he raised an eyebrow at Sakura, she told him that it doesn't matter who else promises to do this, because she has. Looking down at Naruto, Minato asked, "What are you doing way out here?" in a serious tone, turning to the other kids. His eyes lingered on Ino for a few seconds before he scanned to the rest. "Training exercise!" Sakura suddenly shouted, lying to the Hokage, shocking Naruto and frankly everyone else present. Goody Two-Shoes Sakura lying to the Hokage? The ultimate teacher? Naruto shuddered and stared at Sakura. Why was she so intent on proving to him that she was worth trusting? Brushing more water from his eyes, Naruto suddenly noticed the rich green of the field at their feet and the beautiful blue sky above. The combined scent of the wild flowers around him were suddenly super pleasant. Even the air tasted good to breathe in, and Naruto realized under the summer sun just how pretty Sakura's hair looked. "We're hours from the village. During war?" Minato asked her quietly, shaking Naruto loose from what he thought was frozen time, quite frankly. "My idea," Shikamaru suddenly bursted out, finding his own confidence. "It was short-sighted. My apologies, Lord Hokage." "Your idea?" Minato asked doubtfully, turning to Shikamaru. "My fault," Sasuke said, telling Minato about the hole in the village's security and how he wanted to show it to the others. One thing led to the next, and they got carried away. Frowning at Sasuke, Minato then teleported them each back to the village in a matter of seconds, resulting in most of them collapsing and nearly getting sick from the ride. Naruto decided to give them a chance after they actually defended him from the sole focus of his father. If they were willing to stand up to the Hokage, then maybe he could expect something different from the other interactions in the village. Back in the present, Minato stands with 6 Anbu just beyond the Konoha walls. Everyone's panting, and the Anbu are all injured. Minato's covered in blood, but none of it is his. It was a wonder how the rock ninja snuck past the combined efforts of Orochimaru and Tsunade. But old Onoki was clearly off his rocker if he thought this roundabout assault on Konoha would yield any kind of success. Perhaps he thought Minato would be traveling with the offending forces. Maybe Minato's switch with Jiraiya at the last second wasn't information they had spied yet. Regardless, he tells his Anbu to return to their posts after having Shizune check them out. Recoiling from a headache, Minato holds his head and looks at a reflection of himself in one of his shuriken. Perhaps he used a little bit too much chakra on this one. Certainly, had Jiraiya been the defender of this assault, the world would be down a Sanin. Choosing to walk back to town on this low of chakra, Minato makes his way to the gates. Behind him lay a field of 1,000 corpses. And that's the end of today's episode. Another story-rich episode, am I right? There's so much ahead of here that I'm excited to share. I touched a little bit on the remnants of the character crushes from canon here, so for those of you who are interested in that aspect, I'm going to be having a lot of fun with developing that going forward. Of course, we've learned about the Dreadlands and that there are free and roaming tailed beasts in this rewrite. All because Hashirama died before successfully capturing and dispersing the beasts under complete human control. I suppose this sets up more questions that you didn't think you had? If the Akatsuki's after the tailed beasts, why would they target the beasts protected by villagers before these wild and free beasts, right? Way more light was shed on Ino's confession, though not exactly everything yet. Apparently her father was much more open with the nature of Jinchuriki than Minato was with Naruto. Not to mention the rock's seeming absence in its own country. Never mind the vast forces they attempted to use against Konoha, they should have way more somewhere. But where? Each of our team perspectives are sure to have their own kind of challenges as we progress through this war. Today found me touching on each of the teams just to catch up from last episode, but we'll have more focus coming up. And why is Sakura so intent on defending Naruto even when the rest were afraid to make such a proclamation? It's all just very, very interesting. Thanks for listening, everyone. Until next Friday, the sky's the limit.